In 2009, we were asked by a group of community activists and some trade unionists to put together some seminars and some political schools to explain really the crash of 2008. We were quite surprised they came to us. We thought there were experts and people within the trade union and labour movements who knew all about this stuff. Apparently not. We put on a number of political schools in the summer of 2009 and they were full up. We ran 3 or 4 in a row and there were 20 people, 30 people. Then we ran them for the next year, and eventually John Douglas, I don't know if he's here still, of Mandate and Gibbo, somewhere there, invited us down to Dublin to do a one-day political economy class with Mandate's officials and headquarters staff. And after that, they took a decision, they must have enjoyed it, or got something out of it, they took a decision to roll it out to all of their shop stewards across Ireland. And since then, we've been in Sligo, Galway, Cork, Waterford, in Dublin, all across Ireland with Mandate, really basically explaining the bailout, explaining the crisis, helping people understand austerity not as policy, but austerity as ideology. Because alongside the industrial and political struggle that Mandate particularly is involved in, of course, we have to mention the bus strikers today who are on strike, resisting privatisation. Alongside that political industrial struggle, there is a battle of ideas. And our friend from Podemos mentioned it earlier. There's a narrative, a strong narrative in public discourse in the media that we need to challenge. We think that battle of ideas is best engaged through an understanding of political economy, something that we used to do 30 years ago, and particularly in the labour movement, we're guilty of not doing it anymore. We did a survey of trade union education in Ireland and Britain 5 years ago. There was none. There was no one teaching systemic analysis of the system of capitalism, and simply that's what we do. It's not complicated. Name and identify the system, who benefits and how they benefit. That means understanding the infrastructure and the vehicles and the avenues they use to grab the wealth that we create. It means understand there's no value-free neutral economics. All economics is ideological. When you listen to anyone on the TV, whether it's George Lee or our other tosser Dave McWilliams talking on the television, you know they come from a particular school of neoclassical right-wing economics. And it's important to recognise that. We need to actively discuss and promote visions of just alternatives. This is what we do in our political schools. I've got 10 minutes here to squeeze 3 days, so you'll forgive me if I rush. And of course, the last one, participate in the construction of democratic organisations capable of challenging that system. Myself as a trade union activist, but also as a partner in the Right to Water campaign, taking politics out onto the streets and creating democratic structures that might be campaigns, they might be trade unions, they might be community groups, they might be cooperatives. And we think, and of course we have 3 days to do all that, 4 days sometimes, 5 days if we're very lucky. There are people here who can attest to that training. It's impactful, it's interactive, it's intense, and it takes us on a historical journey from, I don't know, about maybe 800 or 900 years. But if you're looking for a date to start to understand the current phase in development and why there's a logic behind privatisation, it's not just a policy or an accident, you could do worse than perhaps think of the first 9/11 in Chile in 1973, when Pinochet, alongside mass murder and torture and the destruction of Chilean democracy, flew in 5 economists from the Chicago School of Economics, one of whom was Milton Friedman, Arnold Harberger, and gave them the option or the task of remaking the Chilean economy. And through a book called Ladrillo, the brick, big, thick, heavy brick, they redesigned, if you like, the Chilean economy, and they called it the Chilean experiment. And it became a model, and it became a model for the rest of the planet. It became a model for people all around the world to implement and to copy. Now, we might know it as neoliberalism, you might know it as Thatcherism. If you're in the States, you'll know it as Reaganomics. If you're in West Africa, you'll know it as structural readjustment programs implemented by the IMF or the World Bank. And you might know it, of course, or, well, Europe knows it as austerity. It happens in different places at different times with different names, but it has one destination, and that's a new kind of economics and a new kind of politics. And we know it, and it's characterised by things that you'll all know, and you'll all know very well, but it's our task and it's our job to understand them. One of the most important and one of the most complex ones is the emergence and dominance of finance capital, the use of debt, the trading in debt, the use of derivatives and futures markets, trading in goods that are not yet even grown or produced, and currency trading, rich people buying and selling money off each other. Completely socially useless activities that yet in themselves have the ability to crash the system at any moment. We also have to recognise the characteristic of this system as the retreat, if not the defeat, of organised labour across the globe, the death of social democracy, an obsession with foreign direct investment seeking out sites of low wages, low taxes in a global race to the bottom, And of course, as we all know, massive and rising inequality, not just within nation states, but across the globe. Ireland is now top of the table, the most unequal country in the European Union. And that's all based, of course, upon the myth of trickle-down economics, the idea that if you let wealth accumulate at the top of society, some of it will trickle down to the rest of us. But we know what capital does when we let wealth accumulate at the top. Apart from buying yachts and gold watches, it speculates with it. It creates more financial bubbles, which again crash on top of the rest of us. But central to the entire project, the backbone of the neoliberal project, of course, is privatization. And that's what we want to talk. That's what we're all talking about today. And so what you see emerging across the globe, everywhere, in every region, every continent, every state, is full spectrum domination of a particular kind of free market ideology, to which, of course, there is no alternative. And it's one of the most dangerous narratives in the modern age. The dictatorship of no alternatives has colonized academia, it's colonized our political space, it's colonized our classrooms. Our kids do entrepreneurialism from the age of 5 and 6 years old. And unfortunately, it's colonized the labor movement. I've been told so many times in the last 5 years that I'm utopian, I'm not pragmatic enough, naive, or worse, what I say is uneconomic. I don't even know what that word means. And the beauty about this system, of course, is you don't need a conspiracy theory to describe it or to point to it. They're very open about what they're doing. And they're telling us quite openly that they're coming for everything. It's not just water, it's everything. It's 100 years' worth of social investment in social goods that they're coming for. $9 trillion sale, how governments could cut their debt and improve efficiency by selling off the assets. And of course, it's not selling assets or selling the family silver is a wrong analogy to make. This is worse. Selling the family silver is a one-off bonus. This is putting a toll booth between us, our children, our communities, and the services that we need to live and survive and live dignified lives. And if you can't pay the toll, then you can fuck off. And you can go and beg to a food bank or beg to a charity or beg at a church. It's a system that has allowed 80 people on the planet to own 50% of the world's assets and wealth. It's a staggering level of inequality. And of course, it's not just about the privatization of, well, everything. It's also about, and you know this better than anyone, the privatization of water. This took place in Athens this week. I haven't had a chance to speak to our Syriza comrade about what happened at it. Apologies for those of you who've seen this before. The Global Water Summit, the Water Value Revolution, it was the meeting of all the global water companies on the planet to discuss the future commodification of water systems everywhere. And of course, some of the workshops were about water conservation, some workshops about infrastructural investment in water and so on. But just in case you're unsure as to the actual purpose of that conference, you just have to look at their website. www.watermeetsmoney.com. The beauty of the system is they're not hiding anything from us. They're coming for it. They're coming for everything. They go on to say they're bringing top water leaders together to share their water management insights and to point the way towards making water an economic value. And one of the companies, we've already heard about them before, one of the great evil empire, Veolia is one of the sponsors of that company, along with Thames Water and all the other water companies. The result, as I said, of this neoliberal project, with privatization at its backbone, if you like, and that's the way they steal the wealth, is massive inequality. And again, they don't hide it. I love the way they boast about it and they kind of laugh in our faces. And they produce lists, the Sunday Times rich list. In America, it's the Forbes 400 richest Americans. Look at that fat. They are really. And they sit there and smug with their billions. And the amounts of money these people have is not. We're having a laugh at this. Oh, anyway. The amounts of money they have, I don't have words to describe it. Grotesque and obscene come to mind. The Walton family, we've worked for them. That's Asda in Northern Ireland. Combined worth of nearly 90 billion. Just to put it into context of what that means for an average worker working as a cashier for Walmart. It would take someone making $20,000 a year, 1 million years, to net the amount of money that one of those Walton siblings is worth. One of the siblings, not the whole 90 billion, about 20 of it. 1 million years to earn the same kind of money they're working for their boss. That's the kind of level of inequality that's staggering and unheard of in history, really. It's a kind of inequality that's hard to contemplate. And people were joking about the Hunger Games recently, about that could never happen on this planet. It's emerging in South America, it's emerging in Eastern Europe, it's emerging in Russia. We're having rich people retreat behind gated communities. patrolled by private security guards. It's not a myth and it's not a joke to say that the levels of inequality are making society more unstable and social instability is. Now, why those people, someone said, I think it was Big Mick there in Kerry, why don't they jump over the fence? That's a very good question of why this is being allowed to happen, why we are letting this happen to our world, to our community, to our nation states. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership currently, as you all know, currently being negotiated behind closed doors in the European Commission, is a bit like neoliberalism planting a big fucking flag in the middle of Europe saying, this is ours. And that we have to stop, because it's not just about the commodification of water or the privatisation of buses or the privatisation of health insurance. It's the privatisation of everything. Here's a quote from Pascal Kearney. He's one of the key lobbyists. There's about 2,000 lobbyists working at the moment. 2,000 lobbyists working at the moment in Brussels, negotiating TTIP on behalf of the private and corporate sector. And he said, industry will oppose any deal in which investment protection is traded off against public policy objectives like human and labour rights. Rachel from Cork said last week, that is a sociopathic system, and it is sociopathic. In that system, there is no love, there is no empathy, there is no community, there's no solidarity, there is just the pursuit of profit. And if we follow that logic to its natural end, we're all screwed. And TTIP specifically promotes, of course, access to public monopolies, and the contradiction in this is massive, to promote competition in the interest of the consumer. How do you have a competition in a private monopoly? And of course, as we know, the investor-state dispute resolution system or private corporate courts will make it nearly impossible for any nation state to renationalise anything that's that's privatised because of the ISDR. Private courts sitting with private judges. So under current conditions, we're facing, as our friend from Conrad from Syriza said, we're facing the end of the period, the golden period of capitalism, if you like, the end of the welfare state. So the task, or what we have to ask ourselves is, do we defend it, or do we look to replace it with more radical social transformation? I think it's the second one. Our future depends... Our future does depend on developing extra parliamentary social struggle to affect the balance of power in society, through mobilisations we see here today of broad social forces, bottom up. And I'm not going to say it, but I'll let one of the richest men on the planet say it. There is class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning. Warren Buffett. Now, the struggle against that ideology, the struggle against neoliberalism is one that you engage with on the streets, through politics, through trade unionism. And my pitch and our pitch, I've gone off a bit on a rant there, but is that educating ourselves is simply part of that struggle. It's not more important or less important. The whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. We need to challenge those that call themselves experts. We need to democratise that knowledge and bring it back into communities and back into the labour movement, and generate in workers and in communities a hunger for that knowledge. And it demands education programmes not that just build collective identity, or that provide simple answers to complex questions or slogans, but one that provides people with the analytical tools that they can use to interpret the world they live in, and by doing so, change it. Thank you. Goramaigi.